everybody, and thank you for joining us on our live stream. I'm proud to say I think this is 4 or 5 in a row that we're actually doing. So this has been awesome. Yay. Let me know how the audio levels are. They look like they're fairly good on here. And also let me know actually if the audio is possibly a little bit delayed. That is one of the things that I noticed in the past. So if it is, we'll definitely get that addressed. And I don't want to subject you guys to that. So, how is everybody doing? I hope everybody had a really, really good weekend. It seems like this one just completely flew by. Today was actually just getting some stuff prepped and planned, running around doing errands. Yesterday, we had a birthday party to go to. And so, like, the entire weekend was just like completely shot and lost. Awesome. Hey, look, my brother's here. All right, so a couple of really cool topics for this one. One of the things I totally forgot to do is send an invite to our YouTuber buddies. So let me actually just do that, and we'll see if anybody joins. 1 second. And if anybody hears screaming kids upstairs, I don't think you would be with this one. Sorry, I'm replying to a message while on a live stream. All right, so that is sent out. Beautiful. All right. So I actually had a couple of really, really interesting topics today. I do want to address some of your questions. We'll definitely get to those. James, I know I have your question answered. I am actually just waiting to get a little bit more information. So I definitely have my answer, in my opinion, on that. But obviously, I know optics, but like I'm not an engineer. And I decided to get you an answer from probably the authority on optics. So I did get a quick answer from him, but I'm trying to get a little bit more detailed answer on that. So I'll absolutely get that to you and we'll absolutely cover that. So a couple of big things from this week. Earlier today, I dropped off the CZ600 back in the mail, and it is going back to CZ. So the CZ600, we did it in 6.5 PRC. I did like 3 or 4 videos with the gun. I have the final video with that particular gun. It's edited, it's pretty much edited, and it's gonna be released a little bit earlier this week. I'm gonna try to get it done tomorrow for release on Tuesday, so hopefully you guys will see that. But the gun did go back. So it's one of the original guns that I purchased about a year and a half ago. And it was a pre-recall, or I guess I calling it the pre-neutered model. So I paid full sticker price for it. I tried to get the gun from CZ, but didn't decide to send me one. So I ended up, because I thought it was going to be like such an awesome gun, and a game changer. I actually went out and I spent my own money and I bought one. And actually, it's like there's a bit of disappointment, but there's also a lot of really, really good stuff that was on that gun. In essence, it was overpromised and underdelivered, but that what was underdelivered was still damn good. The problem is they overpromised. So then there was basically, as it turned out, there was a voluntary recall. It seems like somebody didn't put the barrel back into a place, and the barrel went kaboom, or had the ability to go kaboom. So they decided to fix that issue by fixing the barrels in place. So the main selling point of the CZ600 was the interchangeable barrel systems. So you'd be able to go out and buy a replacement barrel, literally just sticking in, super duper easy, just 3 screws. But apparently it wasn't 100% foolproof, so they got rid of all of that stuff. After that, basically the gun was commercially, it's a failure. I mean, there's really no other ways of describing it. And they've ended up basically dropping the price by 50%. I posted links a little bit earlier on the channel. So like right now, Grab a Gun has it for $488, and then there's $100 mail-in rebate. So it was a $50 mail-in rebate. And I guess after 2 weeks, since nobody took it up, they just decided to up it to $100. So you can get that gun for right around $400. And for $400, it's awesome. Now, of course, it's an insult to anybody who paid the full price for it. But one of the things CZ did do for anybody who's pissed off that for fixing the barrels in place and you can no longer do a quick change system, they were willing to buy the gun back from you. So I sent the gun back to them. I'm telling, here's my receipt. Please send me my money back. And then I will be buying a replacement gun from them. And for that, I actually think it's going to be like a really incredible value. And I think after like a year and a half or 2 years, I can finally look at it like from a fresh perspective. Meaning, hey, here's a gun, here's what it cost, and they're no longer promising the world. It's literally what the gun is. And I think in that light, it's going to be a really incredible value. So that's the CZ600. It was actually pretty nice. The other thing is, so I went out to the range to do that CZ600 video. I met up with a friend of mine, and I was actually just kind of like on another live stream, and one of the things that we're talking about is how us as gun tubers, or anybody who even like has been shooting for a long while or has access to a lot of firearms, it's like we take shooting cool stuff for granted. And I mean, I will say so. I mean, I had a decent amount of guns before becoming a gun tuber, but I mean, it all escalated significantly after I started having a platform, and then basically companies start reaching out to you and like, hey, do you want to do this or that? Um, and I had a friend of mine, so eh, and he bought a lot of really nice stuff. He had a couple of scars. He had more than a couple of scars. And he was one of those types of people that definitely believed in buy once, cry once. And he was buying a lot of the stuff, but he didn't have the, I would say, the experience or the know-how in order how to stretch it out. And kind of like if you talk to me or if you talk to any of the guests that usually come on our channel, or like I'm looking through chat, if you talk to Ryan, which is Boom Country, I know James has the experience with it. So like if you talk to any of one of us and like, hey, I want to go shoot out 5, 6, 700 yards, and like, okay, easy peasy. It's like, okay, what kind of caliber do you want to do it? Or like, do you want to have a little bit of extra challenge and let's do it with a 22? And to us, it's kind of like it's no big deal. I feel comfortable shooting 5, 6, 700 yards with pretty much any center fire cartridge. And for the challenge, I'm not going to say for shits and giggles, but say for the challenge, I definitely want to try that with a 22. So the longest I've shot with a 22 so far was 670 yards, which was out in the West Coast at an event. But I definitely want to try to push it even further. And kind of like shooting rimfire at 300 yards, it's like it's child's play. And I'll kind of give the story with it. But to somebody who doesn't have that experience, it's kind of like, oh my God, you can actually do that. It just seems like it just seems absurd that you can take a 22 and go shoot it at those distances. And the crazy part about this all is, so like I take the front out, I'm like, and so he hooked me up. There's a video that I was planning on doing, and I needed a gun for it. So, and it's kind of like one of those like, do you ever want to meet your heroes? So when I started shooting about 15 years ago, that's when I started my first gun community. My first long action, my long gun was a Remington 700 VS because I couldn't afford a 700 Police, and the VS was basically the same thing as the Police, except it had the stock had a slightly shorter fore end, and it only had one swivel stud instead of two. And I love that gun, but I also didn't have any of the experience at that point, and we didn't really have a lot of the marketing we didn't have a lot of the manufacturing expertise that we find right now. So, I mean, like when I started shooting 15 years ago, the whole notion that, hey, you can go out and you can buy a factory gun for under $1,000 and it's going to shoot sub MOA with factory ammo. I mean, it was basically unheard of. You either needed a hand load, you needed to kind of go out of your way in order to do that. And well, right now you don't. Because we do have those machines. So, like, I was trying to basically get the rifle, and I'm already getting off of the tangent. So, I needed a rifle. Obviously, Remington Arms was no longer in business, and this is before Remage Arms. I didn't have a contact there. So he had basically almost an exact gun that I started shooting with. And for him, he was like, hey, this gun doesn't shoot. I'm like, perfect. Let me actually buy that. So he hooked me up with a deal, but on one condition, which was like, hey, I need to go at some point, help him out and help him sight in his optics and kind of give him like a quick um, a short lesson on how on the basic and the fundamentals of marksmanship and how to set up the gun. So we finally had that opportunity to do that this week. He brought out his FN Scar 20. He brought out his Ruger Precision Rimfire. And I'm like, okay, here, let's meet up at this portion of the range where it's only 100 yards. So there's a 50 and 100. We're going to sight in your Ruger, and then we're going to sight in the Scar. Well, we're going to set up the scopes. We're going to mount them. We're going to zero them, and then we're going to go out to the 700-yard range, and I will absolutely have you shooting at those distances. And he was like, no way. I'm like, yes way, and we'll actually try to get the 22 out that far. Both of these guns were pretty much brand new, and we were shooting regular factory ammunition. And so we got the gun sighted in, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Let's go out. And I'm like, okay, get behind the gun. I started basically calling out like roughly what he should be dialing in for the distances. And I'm like, okay, let's just start with 300. And like he hits right on there. Then we go out to 3, 4, 5, 600 yards, and like he's hitting at all those distances. We're running a little bit low on ammo. I'm like, all right, I have like because we don't want to crack open another box. I'm like, I had like 5 rounds left over. I'm like, I think I know what the dope should be on this, but we completely switched ammo, and like we got it right on that first shot. And I'm like, I left a couple for him. I'm like, hey, here you go. It's dialed in. Just focus on the fundamentals. Take it up to the wall. Breathe. Focus. Pull. And he was able to hit, and like there's like the smile on his face, and it was just awesome. I mean, it was definitely awesome, and it's something I completely take for granted. I mean, the last time I kind of had that smile was, I would say, earlier this summer when I went out. So I went to Tennessee to do some videos with Troy Firearms. And then I went up to Kentucky to meet with Ryan Benning Ballistics, and we were shooting at his range there. And I was shooting the Ruger American 6.5 Grendel, and the smile I had was when we were hitting with it at past 1,200 yards off of a tripod. I'm like, okay, that was cool. I mean, like, that's extreme, but like, as you become more, I would say, like, as you get more experience, it almost seems like the stick, or kind of like what gets you giddy and excited, is completely absurd to the vast majority of people. And I think partly as gun tubers, I do think we take that for granted because, I mean, the stats say what they are. I mean, the vast majority of people are not going to shoot past 100 yards because, number one, there's a lack of ranges around. Number two, they also believe that it's like super expensive. And in reality, I mean, like, you really don't. I mean, well, let's be honest. It's like so for example, like when Dark Lord of Optics, when he does a video on a $5,000 optic, and James, you're kind of getting out to your question as well. When somebody's like shooting at those type of distances, like, hey, you know what? Like, these are actually the tools that somebody actually needs. But there are plenty of people who have far more money than abilities, or like it almost basically, it's like whatever we're looking or whatever we're considering purchasing essentially becomes almost like you got to show off at the range. And for my friend Alex, I mean, absolutely. I mean, like, he has 5 scars and is like, and he needs a ZCO optic on it because it's like, well, that's basically like, if you want to shoot long range, it's like you need to have those. And it's like, and don't get me wrong, like a lot of these companies in these industries, they would love to have you believe that. But in reality, all of that has really changed. And I would say over the last 10 years and 5 years in particular, that if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to go shoot 1,000 yards," I'd be like, "Great, go buy a Ruger American in 6.5 Creedmoor, or go buy a Savage 110 in 6.5 Creedmoor." Or right now, basically say, "Hey, you know what? If you just want to have a rifle and you're not going to do that often, go buy a CZ600 for $500. Go buy a $500 scope, and you'll be able to shoot out 1,500 yards without any issues with regular factory ammo." So you don't need to have that equipment raise if you're just somebody who wants to kind of go out and just go have fun at the range. You don't need that. I think like people really, really take for granted what you need. And I guess kind of like a great reminder and a great example of that. So once we got done with his scar, okay, well, it's a $4,000 gun. Um, Obviously, it's supposed to be able to shoot at 700 yards. Then I'm like, okay, here, let's do this. Let's actually see if we have some ammo left over. And we took a bone stock Ruger Precision rimfire. We had it sighted at 50 yards. And I'm like, all right, let's hold 12 mils up and we're going to go shoot at 300 yards. Bang, bang, bang. It went 3 for 3, which was what we had left in that mag, at 300 yards on an IPSC size steel plate. Brand new gun that basically had less than 50 rounds through it, with regular CCI standard velocity ammo that you can go buy at Walmart. Um, and the kicker of all of this was basically the scopes on there were an Arkin EP5 5-25 and Arkin EP5 the 4-16. So you don't need that far. And I think basically people are kind of like, okay, well, if I like, I would say 10 years ago, and I guess like, especially if you were, I would say if you're an older shooter or more, I would say an older shooter with the vast majority of experience prior to 10 years ago, I absolutely understand somebody basically saying, "Hey, you need to go buy a high quality scope, but if you can't afford it, so here's an Athlon Cronus BTR Gen 2. It's $1,400 because without that scope, there's no way you're going to be able to see at past 500 yards." Um, and I'll also say, like, if you're a brand new shooter and you really don't know what's possible, as consumers, I think we're absolutely preconditioned to kind of think that, while I need to go spend a whole ton of money because there's no way that a $250 or $300 rifle that I buy at Walmart is going to be able to hit the broadside of a barn past X amount of distances. And that's completely unreasonable and untrue. So why basically spend more money? And this is kind of like, so I would say, so my Ruger American rifle, basically it's a stock barreled action. We do have it in a um, Sharps Brothers stock. We did have it. I mean, I was shooting off a tripod, so the bipod really doesn't matter. And then the only real upgrade on that was to a Timney trigger, which makes the trigger a lot cleaner. I'm a big fan of two-stage trigger, so it was great. That's really the only upgrade to that gun. And here we are taking a 6.5 Grendel. It was like a champ out to 1,000 yards off of a tripod. And the fact that it was hitting off of a tripod, I mean, I will say is, look, shooting off of tripods, it's gotten me spoiled, because it's like, okay, well, if I can shoot it off a tripod and hit the steel, why do I want to get down? And sometimes, like, sitting at the benches, like, since you can't really adjust how the bench is, and I'm like, I'm not going to bring like a massive like joy pod or like a sled or anything else like that. You know what? I'm just going to shoot it off of a tripod until I can't, and then I'll go shoot down. So here I am with a stock gun off of a tripod, and like we're hitting 5, 6, 7, 800 yards, 1,000 yards. I'm like, wow. I'm like, okay, well, and like I was happy and I was about to call it a day, but like Ryan's like, well, you got more ammo. Let's keep on going. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. And it's like we were so like we move on to 1,200 yards. And basically right around that 1,200 yards is when I started to feel that the scope was actually holding me back a little bit. So not like the gun, but the actual scope. And where it wasn't the lack of internal adjustment or anything else like that. We didn't run into that until we were at 1,500 yards. But was kind of holding it back. So, like, we were shooting in probably the worst environmentals out there, which was we were shooting in, it was like 85 degrees already at that point, and it was like 80% humidity. There was a massive amount of mirage. And I'm like, okay, that combined with the fairly crappy eye box of the Arc and EP5, it makes it a little bit more uncomfortable to start shooting. And if anybody who's been shooting for a while, like, you definitely know what I'm talking about. So it's like at that point, I'm like, hey, you know what? I do wish I had my Mark V with me or like something a little bit further on. So it definitely was a little bit more of a struggle. But if you're not going to be shooting at those distances, or let's say, for example, you're shooting in dry conditions, or let's say when it's cold and there's really not a lot of mirage, then you don't need to blow a lot more money. And so this kind of like where it leads to is like, so James Salmon, he asked me in one of my comments, okay, it's about the Tract Torics and the Razor Gen 5. And I'm like, I kind of knew already my answer. And actually, let me see, do I have it? I have one on that's still in box. So let me grab it for a second. Yes. So this is kind of like what I mean, like we're spoiled and as gun tubers. I mean, I have like 3 of these. Um, and like it's still sealed. All right. So hopefully YouTube does not spank me for having a knife on a live stream. So we're not going to see that. Good. I'm putting it away. So this is the 4.5 to 30, which is the one that James had a question with. So we have the scope. Hey, we're doing a live unboxing. So this is what you get with an Tract optics. You have a 0-stop ring. You have lens cleaning cloth. You have a contact us. And then you have a sunshade. The battery's inside over there. All right. So he had a question. Okay, do I go for this one? Or does he go for a Razor Gen? Actually, let me move this because the camera might go crazy and start focusing on that. So this is the 4.5 to 30 Tract Toric Ultra. I'm like, I thought it was chipped. It's just a sticker. By Tract Optics. And I would say that this scope has really become, I would say, the standard for value at that $1,500 to $1,600 price point. And I basically know that basically we're like, okay, well, it's like it's expensive, and it is. And absolutely somebody is going to bring up. They're going to bring up, well, you can, my Arcan EP5 or my Arcan SH4 Gen 2 is just as good, and I've shot it at this and this. And it's true. You can absolutely shoot those scopes at those distances and in those conditions. Um, you can definitely do that. The question is it the right tool or the optimal tool? And what do you do? So if you're like the vast majority of gun owners and you're really going to be shooting at 1, 2, 300 yards, don't waste your money on this. I mean, you're only going to look like an idiot to anybody who actually knows about optics or anything else like that, because you can shoot that with a crappy Walmart scope. And I guess kind of like the best example of that was, I haven't published the update to it, but 2 years ago, I bought the Savage Axis in 6.5 Creedmoor. It was the Cabela Special. It came with a 3 to 9 power scope and $259 after rebate. And here we are, we're shooting it at 700 yards with absolutely zero issues. You can do that. I mean, like, you don't need anything crazy. It's just that these do make certain things easier. So when you go to a scope such as this, Corey, that's a great point. He brought up a physics. Okay, just claim that you're only zeroing at a 300. So I have two of these scopes. I had this one literally I just got. So in full disclosure, I do like the guys at Tract Optics. I think they're fantastic people. I do love how they care about the quality and the products that everything we're putting together. I've had experience with two other Tract scopes that came to me that I had forwarded on to Alex. And then I was sent the 4.5 to 30 about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago when they came out. And I have one on my custom shop Ruger Precision rifle, but that one was in MOA. Most recently, when Tract Optics launched the 4 to 25, which I would have actually brought up right now, but it's actually sitting on one of my guns. I don't remember which one did I put it on. Oh, no, it's on the Springfield 2020. So basically, I wanted to like. That's a whole different story. But I put the best scope that I had, not sitting on anything else, on that rifle, just so when we can test it, so when it sucks, we can basically say that it wasn't the scope that was holding it back. So when they were launching that scope, their main production company that helped them do the videos, they couldn't do it, and I was at NRA, and like they knew I'd do videos, and I'm actually fairly close to the owners distance-wise. And we're like, hey, can you help us out? Can you can you help us come out to the range and help us with the videos? I'm like, okay, well, do you want me just to like hold the camera? Do you want me to record it? He's like, no, we need everything, like editing and everything. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll be able to help you out. And so, how much do you charge? I'm like, well, it's like, like in all honesty, it's like this is something we definitely wanted to come in and start producing videos, but you're actually would be the first company that we're working with in that regard, where we're not producing videos for ourselves, but for you. So I'm like, I'll tell you what, instead of you paying us, I'm like, I have a 4.5 to 30 in MOA, and I don't do MOA, but that's the only thing they had at that point. I'm like, get me one in MRAD, and then also get me the 4 to 25 as a sample so I can do the videos on it, and I'll help you out. I'll do the videos, I'll record the videos, help you produce them, edit them, and all that stuff. So that is my relationship with the company. So I did get these optics from them. Would I actually spend my own money on them? Yes, I would get the 4 to 25. But I'll talk about that in one sample. So basically, what do you get with this and why it's as good of a value? So it's roughly the same price as the Athlon BTR Gen 2, but there's more here. So number one, the one thing you have to realize is pretty much no one actually designs and manufactures their own optics these days. There's certain large OEMs that you can go to and you can basically tell them, this is what I want, and they'll do it for you. Or what a lot of companies do, and especially at lower price points, is those OEMs, they have already developed their own scopes, and they can either just help you customize by putting in a different color, different turret, or like different reticle, and they'll slap your name on it, and then that's basically it, and you can charge twice the price. So when it comes to a lot of the optics, so when the Tract Toric and the Athlon and the Maven and the I think there's like two others. I think like the EOTech or somebody else. When the scopes look roughly the same, or like they look very, very similar, just a few differences, odds are they're made at the same OEM. And it could be the same components or it could not be the same components. So the Tract Toric in particular, they use high-end shot German glass. It is made in Japan. It is not a Chinese-made scope. Tract did design the reticle. They designed the turret system on this, which is fantastic. The turrets on here are super nice. You have illuminated reticle on, off in between each click, which I absolutely love. Everything is nice and smooth. You have a zero stop and you have locking turrets. So it's a great freaking scope. Same OEM as this guy. This is the Athlon BTR, Cronus BTR Gen 2, but obviously you have a different turret system, and you have all that stuff. The two primary differences between these scopes, and I would even say you can put Vortex in there, is you have to look at the company structure. So traditionally, you have your Athlon, your Vortexes, your SIGs. When they're going out to design a scope, often than not, they're designing a product to fit a specific price point because they have to go to the OEM. The OEM is going to charge them money. OEM basically is going to need to make their 50% on it or whatnot. Then Athlon or whoever the company is, they have to then basically go through either a 2-tier or possibly 3-tier distribution system. So they're going either to dealers, who dealers need to have their markup before the time that they pass it on to you. Or what some companies do is they go through master distributors. So the scopes are sold to the master distributors who need to make money, and the master distributors need to sell it to dealers who need to make money, and then it goes back to the consumer. So with most traditional scopes, you have a lot of those markups that need to get basically built in. With Tract, they're consumer direct. So they don't distribute on Amazon, they don't go through dealers. And as a result of it, they have a lower price point that they can hit with the scope. So for example, this one's 1700. I am absolutely confident that if they needed to go through dealers, then this would be a $2,500 scope, just as the Loophole Mark Vs are, and so forth. So that is part of the reason why the Tract scopes in particular have built up such a cult following. So then the question comes out is, why don't we see more Tract Toric scopes? And that's actually a fairly simple one. So Tract optics, I mean, they're almost like between a rock and a hard place. We don't have a massive marketing budget. And when you don't have like massive marketing budgets, then you have to rely on partnering with creators. So let's say, for example, someone does a video, they'll do the video for free or for cheap in exchange for the product, because they know that on the back end, if you buy the optic through their affiliate program, they're going to make money. So the biggest issue basically with Tract Toric is they don't have an affiliate program. They're not sold for distributors. So the people who are really using these are truly using these out of the goodness of their hearts, or they're smaller content creators to whom getting a $1,500 scope is like the bee's knees. I do think that they have a lot of potential and they can probably do something with it, but that's already privy for a different conversation. But so the Tract Toric, and this one in particular, is a fantastic freaking scope. Now, is it as good as a Razer Gen 3? No, it's not. It is not as good of a scope. So I had this question basically for Ilya, Dark Lord of Optics, who's intimately familiar with these scopes and the Razors. He helped designs a lot of the scopes. So plain and simple, the Razer Gen 3 is it's a higher end scope. It's a tier 1 scope. They did design things in that scope. They didn't go to an OEM. So for example, like when someone like Athlon or like somebody who wants to slap their name on a scope, not that I'm saying that Athlon slaps their name on a scope, Bob, that came out completely wrong. But let's say, for example, if you're a company who caters to dealers, you have to hit price points and metrics, you would go to an OEM and you'd almost kind of like work within their abilities. And Vortex absolutely does that for their lower scopes, like the Strike Eagles and the Diamondbacks and all of that stuff. But the Razor really is, it's their own design inside and out. And that's one of the scopes that's not, it's meant to be a great scope. It's meant to be a tier 1 scope where pricing, I can't say that price is not a consideration in terms of how that scope is made, but price is less of an issue as opposed to somebody who's trying, let's say, for example, like Arkin, who's trying to compete at a certain price point. So the design is more advanced than the Razor. The glass quality is probably going to be a little bit better. It's probably going to have a little bit more features. I don't have a Razor Gen 3, but I did play with one at a PSA event. I do have a video. I'm going to go back. I'll try to upload it. And the turrets on there were like pretty sharp. The parallax was super stiff. It absolutely was super stiff. Now, is it a better scope? Yes. My question is, so depending on the price point that you're paying for it, is this going to hold you back? And that's a completely different question. So much like an Arkin EP5 is not gonna, if an Arkin EP5 is not gonna hold back somebody who's shooting at 300 or 400 yards, this is not going to hold you back unless you're shooting, let's say, past a mile. And I would say the other asterisks would be like under extreme conditions, and you're in one of those situations. Let's say, for example, like if you go to an NRL Hunter match or you go to a PRS match. And so I haven't shot those matches, but I do have plenty of experience with USPSA matches, like handgun, run and gun type stuff. I used to compete locally. I competed at nationals and everything in between. I was a sponsor coordinator for a lot of the matches until I hurt my wrist. And the stuff that you see on competitors' guns is absolutely not in any way a good representation of what the real world is like. Not even close. So to a high-end competitor, let's say, for example, you're on the line, you've spent, and like these are the types of guys who they will go travel 6, 7, 8 hours drive time just to go to their next closest match, or they'll fly out, they'll pay $400-$500 match fees. They will replace barrels every 2-3 matches. I mean, they're that committed. These are people who are already spending $10,000 on a gun. So to them, spending an extra $1,500 between this and a Razor Gen 3 or a Schmidt & Bender or a Collis, Tangent Theta, any of those scopes, $1,500 is a dime in the is a drop in the bucket for somebody who has that much on the line. So that's why in a lot of the matches, you're generally not going to see those that much at the higher end matches. At the local matches, you'll probably see quite a bit more of those. But kind of like in the handgun world, so people like, okay, like CZ, and I do poke fun about this all the time. So when you go to a USPSA Nationals match, 50% of the guns shot by at the national level match are either CZ or CZ clones, such as the Tanfoglios. Meanwhile, worldwide, or you look at the United States handgun market, CZ is struggling to break out of 1% market share. So if you're really focused on a very high end, or if all you're doing is watching Ilya's videos or other high end competitors or high end hunters or people who are paid in order to talk about product, yeah, I mean, like they're gonna go for like the highest end thing. And I do think even myself as a gun tuber, like when I have access to, so like I'll have access to loopholes in this. I don't have like $5,000 ZCOs or tangent betas or any of those. But it's sometimes like very easy, just basically say, hey, yeah, you don't just go spend $1,500 on a Tract Toric or an Athlon Cronus because it's a really good scope. And it is. But we kind of forget that $1,500 is a lot of money. $3,000 is a lot of money. And it's like, and if that person is never, I mean, and it's kind of like, it's a two-way thing. So on one hand, if somebody comes up and is like, hey, I want to have a really, 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 I want to get a good scope. So let's say I just bought a Ruger Custom Shop RPR, or I am going on an Alaskan hunt and I'm going to shoot far. And like, what's a really good scope? And if you ask any of us, we will automatically assume and we'll basically say, yeah, like if you want like good, really, really, really good scope, I would say one of the staples and one of like the bellwethers is going to be the Leupold Mark V HD for right around $2,000. If you can't quite swing 2,000, you're going to go with the Tract Toric. And like, but if you can really, if money's no object and you have FU money, then go with a zero compromise optics or go with a tangent theta or something like that. And then we often forget to ask, oh, great, so it's going to be fine for 300 yards. And then like you have like a face palm moment. So our expectations are going to be completely different from somebody else. All right, so James kind of brought up, so the Gen 3 is going to be $2,600 on Amazon. This is going to be $1,500 or $1,600. It's like if I'm personally spending my own money, and let's say, for example, you're going to be shooting inside 1,000 yards or inside 1,500 yards, the Tract is going to be just fine of a scope. If you really feel like you need to spend more money, then yeah, I mean, the Razor is going to be fine. I don't think it's going to be as quote unquote user friendly. I mean, it's built for a specific mission. I mean, it's built for military grade. You can shoot at it. It's like, I mean, it's a heavy, 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 heavy scope. Or it's meant for somebody to whom extra money is not going to be. It's like, look, if you're well off and money is not really a consideration, then yeah, you can get the best thing you can do. Is it going to make you shoot better? No. I mean, there's definitely diminishing returns at that point. There's definitely diminishing returns. And especially because, I mean, let's put it this way. If your entire goal is to hit 1,000 yards and you're not going to be shooting in extreme conditions. So by this, I mean with a suppressor, and you're going to be sending a bunch of rounds down range, and you're shooting in like 100-degree heat where you have mirage up the wazoo, then you don't need to spend a ton of money. I would say basically like once you kind of get to that Element Titan Burris RT25, kind of like that $500 to $800 price point, diminishing returns quickly get in. So is a $500 Vortex Venom or an Arcan EP5 better than a $200 scope? Yes, and you can almost say it's twice as good. Is a $1,000 or an $899 Element Titan better than a twice as good as a $400 Arcan EP5? No. Is it better? Yes. Is it twice as good? No. Is one of these at 3 times the price of a Vortex Venom, is it 3 times as good? No, not really, unless you specifically need it for that marginal edge capabilities, then yeah. Now, my personal take on this is I freaking love the new 4 to 25 rather than this guy, which is the 4.5 to 30. So this, I believe, has like 30 mils of internal elevation adjustment, but they were asking for a scope that was going to be great for extended rimfire shooting. Or let's say, for example, you're shooting with like 8.6 blackout or anything else like that, then you need more. You need more internal elevation adjustment. So the new 4 to 25 has 48 mils of internal elevation adjustment. The image quality is just as good. Basically, the only thing you're giving up is it's 25 power magnification instead of 30. That's what you're giving up. That scope is phenomenal. It is a phenomenal scope, and at that point, you're really not going to find anything that is more capable for that $1,500 price point. So if I was spending my own money right now, that would absolutely, and you can swing $1,500, and you're actually going to shoot past 1,000 yards center fire, or you're going to shoot past, I would say, let's go beyond 300 yards rimfire. I would absolutely get that scope. It is that awesome of a scope. And the only other scopes that are as capable in terms of internal elevation adjustment, I think, like Ilya said, there's like one others. There's coupled in development that we'll probably see around SHOT Show, but all of those are going to be more money. So that's basically the way that I would go. So as you spend more money, do you generally get a better scope? Yes. Do a lot of YouTubers and marketing companies, they want you to spend that money? Yes. They will almost position the products that if you don't have it, then you can't shoot, and like it's not possible. And that's utter BS. So I would say basically, and a lot of the issues really do come in when, so for example, like Arkin, when they came in, and I'm not even gonna say it's the company that's the problem, it's some of the influencers they partnered up with, and they put in the processes and I would say things that are necessary in order for people to be less than honest. And that's where you have videos such as this scope is just as good as this Schmidt and Bender, because this scope is also the one that pays you a very hefty commission as well. I don't think it's necessarily that big of an issue anymore because that commission has been dropped, but you do have people out there who are certainly promoting it. And that is why, I mean, that's the whole other train of in every review video that we do, within the first 60 seconds on the bottom, there's going to be a disclaimer. And basically, it's going to state whether I got the product on loan, whether I got the product for keeps, or if somebody paid the money. You absolutely need to know that because that is going to put things, it's going to give you all the information that you, as viewers and buyers, need in order to make an informed decision. I'm not, so I would say my friends and the people that come onto this show are honest and good people, and they truly want to see people, gun owners, get the right product for them. But there are people who are less moral and they're in it for themselves. But over time, those people get basically found out. So my own personal take is I do get a lot of companies reaching out to me and they're like, hey, can you review this? Or like, they'll even pay you this. But I'm like, okay, it's like, I will take a look at it. But if it's like a really, really crappy product, I'm just not going to review it. I'm just not. And the part of the reason why is, let's put it this way, like people forget that the gun industry, it's like, it's a big industry, but it's also a very small industry. And if we truly care about gun rights, then we shouldn't be unfairly crapping on other companies. Let's put it in that way. I truly believe, so for example, like even between these scopes, even though I'd probably buy this one, I do think that there is a market at this, let's even say at the same price point for this scope as well. And kind of like my goal is to help you identify whether the product is right for you or not. So is there a group of people for whom a higher end scope is going to be better? Yes. Is there going to be a group for other people? Yeah. But my goal kind of is, okay, let me just give you the information that you need in order for you to make up your mind about that. And hopefully people kind of like don't fall into the whole thing. Hey, let's put this way. There is a certain thing as good enough. It's not everything. It's not everything or nothing. There truly is a lot of in between. And we're kind of like blessed to have so many products. It's not like even, let's say 15 years ago when I got into it and I wanted to go shoot 300 yards because that's what the furthest distance we could shoot at our local range. Our two, let's put it this way, if your budget was a factory gun, you really only had two options. Your option was a Remington 700 or a Savage 110. And then whichever gun you bought, you still need to buy match grade ammo, or you need to go buy a whole bunch of other stuff in order to be able to do that. And even like the scope quality in the first focal plane reticle rifle scope market, we didn't have the Strike Eagles or any of those. You had to spend over $1,000 in order to get a scope. You absolutely needed to do that. we don't live in that type of environment right now, and we truly live in a place where you can go to Walmart, and with the manufacturing that these companies put in. So I guess one of the things that people don't realize is that there are, at the big manufacturers, there's very few gunsmiths left. So for instance, Ruger Precisions, Ruger Americans, there is no gunsmith putting that gun together. None. It's basically, it's paid laborers who are able to put part A and part B and slap everything together and follow a process. The vast majority of the precision gets built into the manufacturing process, so that the tolerances are tight enough that they can basically come together and you're good. And that is why your average factory gun now basically became capable of shooting 1 MOA or better. And where you do need to go the high-end route is if now you want to go, okay, well, 1 MOA is no longer good enough. I'm going to be competing at the nationals matches, and I need to be able to, I need to have a gun capable of holding half MOA out to 1,000 yards. And that's going to be the realm of the custom guns, or very, very high-end semi-custom guns. But they're able to do that and bring the costs down. Same thing with optics. So you can almost kind of like thank Vortex for this, because they took their engineers, they came out with the processes, they found competent OEMs. So in the past, you had like some cheap Chinese stuff, which was like uber cheap. And then you had like the cheap first focal plane reticle rifle scopes that are manufactured in the Philippines. Thanks to Vortex, I would say, they put in quality controls in place that now you can actually get a very good high-end scope manufactured in China with components from all over the place. And even when it comes to glass, I mean, like if you're getting ED glass, you can get ED glass that is just as good from China, Japan, America, Germany, and so forth. I mean, it has to meet a standard. It has to meet a standard. So one of the other scopes that was mentioned was the Athlon Ares ETR. That is a fantastic scope for the money. I would say it's probably at that edge for a Chinese-made scope. It's definitely, I believe, the most expensive Chinese scope. But then again, there's nothing stopping somebody from getting a $500 Chinese scope and marketing it up to $1,500. So there's that. But I believe retail, commercial-wise, the Ares ETR is probably one of the more expensive ones. It's a damn good scope. I've looked through it. I don't have any personal experience with it. But then basically kind of like the question you'll have to ask, because I mean, like $1,000, you can already get a Japanese-made optic at that price point. And I do believe, so now I'm not saying the quality, I'm saying the quality control. So you're more likely to get a more consistent product coming out of Japan than you are out of some factories in China. But it ultimately really depends on the individual scopes, individual companies. And Derek, if you want to pop on later, I left the link in our thing. So that's that. But I mean, honestly, if you're already spending, let's say, for example, $1,300 on an Ares ETR, I would get the Athlon 4 to 25. I'm sorry, I would get the Tract 4 to 25 for 1,500, and it's just a nicer scope all around. And once again, kind of like the one thing you have to keep into consideration is a scope like Maven or Apex Optics, which is a newer one out of Canada, which is same OEM. And Tract is very consumer direct. So if you're comparing apples to apples, well, apples to oranges, if you're comparing this scope, the more equivalent price point to compare this to would be something like the Leupold Mark V, like those type of scopes. I would even say some of the Night Forces, rather than a same equivalent type scope from a company that has a two-tier distribution system. So that's kind of like the weird part. And that's kind of like where Tract in particular has carved out that niche. You do have Maven optics, which we do have some pretty cool stuff, but they're generally geared towards higher end hunters. And I think the reticle choices are complete garbage. And then you have the newer company Apex Optics, which we follow kind of like the same process. They are consumer direct. They do care about the value. I mean, just look at this. Look how smooth this is. Like the smooth zero stop. I mean, the turrets on here are fantastic. It's just a great scope. The razor is also like, I mean, this is fairly heavy, but the razor is even heavier. And I like the sniper gray. I love the finish on this. And what I will say, kind of like the other consideration point is, if you're the type of person who needs a lot of hand holding, Vortex is a massive company, but I will say that when you have an issue with Tract, when you call them up, it's going to be one of the two owners that's picking up the phone. And when we were out at the range, recording the videos, I heard him pick up the phone. He was talking to a couple of customers, answering their questions, and at no point he ever mentioned, "Hey, by the way, I'm also the owner of Tract Optics." So like they're really, really, really nice people. So I would say if you want to support a good company and good people, go with Tract. Yeah. So that's that. Hopefully that answered that question, James. All right, let me go through some more of these, and then we'll kind of get back on our course. Wow, there's a whole bunch of you people. And if you haven't been a channel member yet, hit the join button. That's like right down there. And thank you to all the members who are on the stream. All right, great question. Do I shoot my Ruger Precision anymore? Yes, I do. I actually shot it this weekend. There was actually 3 videos that I shot with it, but like I shot them a while back, and I'm like one of those people, like I'm not really happy with the quality, or like I think I would do something a little bit different with them. So we're absolutely going to redo it. So I'm assuming we're talking about the custom shop RPR. So there are 2 or 3 videos I wanted to do with that one. Number 1 is going to be a trigger comparison between the available triggers in there. So let's say, for example, a stock trigger, the trigger that comes in a custom shop RPR, which is the Trigger Tech Fuel trigger. Then we have a trigger from Jard, a trigger for Timney. So we'll actually compare them all side by side. The one thing that's kind of holding it off a little bit is I do have a Trigger Tech Diamond trigger, but it's a prototype. I was on, so if you go back to last week's live stream, we discussed with Aaron on where the Trigger Tech triggers for the RPR are. For some reason, we're not making them. So there's some delays or something. So those triggers are about a year delayed now at this point. But we'll definitely do that. And then the other one is, quote unquote, everything wrong with the custom shop RPR and how to fix it. There's only like so basically some extra accessories for that gun in particular. But otherwise, the gun is really, really, really nice. I mean, it's like super smooth. It's a great gun for the money, and it's probably in the beginning of next year I will start shooting PRS, and that'll be the gun I use. One of the original RPRs, I do wish they still had the 223 RPR, or did them in like 6.5 Grendel. That would be really good. 7 PRC is a very interesting thought. One of the questions I do have is whether, so what most people don't realize is, so Ruger was one of the launch partners for 6.5 PRC. So the Ruger Precisions generally came in 2 sizes. You have the standard actions, which is like 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, and so forth. And then they had the large Magnum ones, which is 300 Win Mag, 300 PRC, and 338 Lapua. And at that time, when we were launching the 6.5 PRC, 300 PRC didn't exist yet. So it was really just the 300 Win Mag and 338 Lapua. So when 6.5 PRC came out, because it was kind of like this little bit bigger cartridge, they didn't want to stuff it into a short action. So they designed an intermediate action, which is only used for 6.5 PRC. I do wonder if 7 PRC would actually fit into that, or you would have to go with a large magnum on that. But 7 PRC is a really cool cartridge. I'm absolutely so late into getting into there, but I do think like we have like cartridge overload. But I am gonna build a 7 PRC as well. Wow, and that was just like that was an hour ago that those questions came in. Wow, sorry about that. Time. Wow, we've been on already for an hour. That is crazy. Um, Yeah, I would say a really good value is going to be the Razer Gen 2 as well. Although the Horus, the Tremor 3 reticle, go ahead and ask Ilya what he thinks on those. It's like way too much. That was an abomination. Okay, so on this topic, SHOT Show is coming up. Yay! I do have something really, really exciting coming up with that. So, let's say I got the new crack phone, the iPhone 15 Pro Max Jigma thing, and one of the cool things we're going to have with that is, so one of my big goals for SHOT Show was I wanted to live stream directly from the show. The problem is the internet connection there is not going to be stable enough, and we're definitely not Supermat Pro to have our own live van with satellite feeds and all that stuff. But because of there's some new apps that are available, one of the things we'll definitely be able to do is record a lot of footage, and it'll automatically get uploaded to our editor, and there'll have an editor who'll be able to edit them and release the videos basically as they happen. So we'll definitely be able to do quite a bit of stuff on there. So super excited about that. Yeah. So I mean, and the one thing also to consider is that like when people kind of like, one thing that gets me is people's like, oh, I got this scope, I'm doing long range. So long range is going to be different for different people. For people who generally don't have access to 100 to, let's say, to 300-yard ranges, 300 yards is considered long range. Oftentimes, so like I'm like a local celebrity in my local FFL. Whenever I go there, like you're like, hey, I'm looking for a recommendation. And like, well, great. Well, by the way, it's like, here is a YouTuber of us here. He is like really knowledgeable about guns. So why don't you ask him? And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. It's like, yeah, I want to get a rifle. I'm interested in long range shooting. And I just want to know how much I need to spend and what I should get. I heard that this high end Vortex is really good, or should I be spending this much money on loophole? I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, I'm already at this point, I know, and I'm like, okay, so where are you going to be shooting? It's like, oh, like I heard there's a 300-yard club around here. So, you'd really have to be specific about what the case use for the thing is going to be. So not a lot of people are actually able to go out and regularly shoot at those distances. And of course, this really brings up 22s. And like, if you only have access to, say, to 300 and you want to experience the joys of shooting at 1,000, well, the skills necessary to shoot a 300 at 300 with a 22 is going to be roughly equivalent to what it takes to shoot at 1,000 yards. So nice. You have an awesome public range in Albuquerque 5. That's fantastic. So a lot of the ranges on the on the East Coast, you really don't have those abilities. I mean, you got those fancy trees that stand in the way. I would say the people who can shoot like mountain to mountain, like those are fairly lucky. And I will say one of the biggest things for me as a content creator that opened up opportunities for me is so I was able to join a club where we have routine access out to 700 yards, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the drone footage for. It's also the range where a couple of other gun tubers record, including TGC, the Gun Collective. I'm sorry, TGC, yeah, the Gun Collective. They record out there. They have a lot of gun companies out within the area. Geisley opened up their range, and then most recently, one of my friend's friends. He just bought his own property and he's going to have access to a mile-long range. So that's going to be interesting. So like we're finally starting to get access to a lot of these areas, but a lot of people don't. Or like if there is a range where you're able to shoot that far, it's going to be super expensive. So I would say a public range where you can shoot that distance, let's say, for example, 1,000 yards, you're going to be looking at either driving 4 hours into like middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, or you'd go to upstate New York, and then there's a range there, Sheepdog Warrior, where you can shoot up to 1,000 regularly. But the memberships are fairly expensive on there, and like it just kind of adds to the cost. And kind of really kind of going back to it, it's like, okay, well, if somebody's on a fixed budget, I'd basically say, hey, get as much of a scope as you actually need rather than want, and then put the rest of the money towards either range fees, gas to get to the range, targets, other accessories that you're going to need and are going to make your life easier rather than the actual scope. And I'd also say kind of like once you've scratched that itch, then you're going to start looking for a challenge for yourself. So I will say, I mean, like when I bought that Savage Axis Savage Axis and 6.5 Creedmoor for $260, part of it that was the challenge of, well, how far can we actually push it? If my entire goal was, hey, I want to be able to hit 1,000 yards, it would be very easy for me to think that I need to get like these massive expenses. And I will say kind of like the backstory with this is, and almost kind of like how the channel started was, the furthest I've ever shot generally was at the local range where when I lived in Jersey, we had a range that was 300 yards, and that's like the furthest that I shot in a match. Until I started going to SHOT Shows and media days there, occasionally once a year, I would go out and shoot, let's say, for example, to like 650 or 700 or 800 yards. My first time when I shot 1,000 yards was actually within the same 24-hour period where I also hit my first 1,000, my first 1,200, my first 1,600, my first mile, my first 2,100, and my first 2,300 yards. And that was at that Ruger media event. So I was kind of like, it's like, and the fact that we did that with stock factory guns, with factory ammo and just a decent scope. I was like, wow, you can actually do this with accessible items. That itch was basically checked. And then it kind of almost became almost like a challenge of like, okay, well, how far can we push it? And that's basically the whole, okay, let's shoot 300 yards with a rimfire. Let's go 5, 6. And so the furthest I shot with a rimfire was 670 yards at one of the events. So I look at it truly from, and the biggest thing for me is from the value perspective. And ultimately, like, what is it that you actually need rather than telling you, hey, you know what, just go blow this money because yes, this is in fact a better scope. All right, the battery just died early, actually. Give me 1 second. Let me change the battery on the camera and we're going to get right into it. And we're still here. Well, if I'm trying to change the battery, I should get the right battery. All right. All right, sorry about that. Wow, 5 people dropped off because the battery went dead. You guys suck. All right. Yeah, like, and I was trying to plug in my Sony battery into a Panasonic camera. That was whacked. All right, no. So basically, kind of like the one thing is, and kind of like, so my goal personally, and kind of like my mantra is to see how far can we push it on the least amount of money possible, because I do value your wallets. I know it's very easy for a lot of people. Like, I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, go buy Loophole Mark V or anything. Like, it's like, hey, you want to go shoot 300 yards with a 6.5 Creedmoor? Yeah, Loophole Mark V is going to do it. It's going to be a great scope. It is a great scope. It's totally overpowering it. So that's the philosophy behind it. If you want to peg the broadside of a barn at 500 yards with a $300 Walmart special, you better add the tasker to your cart. See, I call BS on that. Because it's just 500 yards. And part of it is really going to be the caliber choices. So with a modern caliber like 6.5 Creedmoor, where you're going to have the tolerances, which are much, much, much more precise, it's much easier to be more accurate. I would say with an old 3, old 8, yeah, it would be more difficult. But as long as the scope is half decent, you should be able to. And what I will say is, you should talk to some of the guys. Go out to find your local range and find an NRA service rifle match or find a CMP Garand vintage match. There are guys who are shooting 600 yards out of old surplus Garands, bolt actions like 1903s with iron sights. So if I would say if you need an optic to hit at those distances, yeah. No, but you definitely don't. Ryan, glad you love your tripods. I am going to try and see if we can do one just for the members. So was able to secure one for the general giveaway, but I think we're going to have one that we're going to do just for the members. Okay, so no Arkans for me, please. Okay, so kind of going back to the discussion and the Ares ETR and versus others, I think one of the questions you have to answer for yourself is, and so I'm not singling you out, James, I'm saying by you as the person watching this video, is whether or not you're allergic to Chinesium or Chinese made scopes. There are people out there that for their own beliefs, they don't want to have anything, they don't want to have a Chinese made scope. That's awesome. I fully support your belief or your right to that belief. And that's going to be basically a point of consideration, but basically do know that by going that route, you're also going to be limiting a lot of products and you're setting limitations to that. If somebody is not allergic or if you don't mind a Chinese made scope, there is a ton of Chinese made scopes that support a ton of American jobs and American companies that are great. Right now, by manufacturing in China, you can save a lot of money on the labor costs there and therefore bring the prices down. And that in turn creates more jobs for retailers and it supports the local FFLs. I mean, let's be honest. If you're a local FFL, you're generally not going to be able to afford retailing a scope, let's say, for example, that's going to be made in the United States, because that's really going to be killing price points. It's going to be absolutely more difficult. So I mean, we do live in a global economy. The one thing with Chinese made scopes, and honestly, for all intents and purposes, and Philippines, and I would say even in Japan a little bit too, is going to be the quality control. So as long as the company has their own QC people on site, then you're okay. Let's put it this way. I mean, I've had Philippines made 6 scopes that were dead on arrival because no one QC'd them. Meanwhile, I know people who QC every single thing that comes out of the factory and they check every single one of them. So that's going to play a massive, massive difference in terms of that. But if you're not opposed to Chinese made scopes, I think that's basically the Vortex Venom, a lot of the Buruses, the Elements are really, really, really good scopes for the money. If you don't want that, then basically I would say you're looking at the Japanese made scopes. And at that point, really like something like this is going to be a terrific scope. US made scopes is going to be, if you need to have a US made scope, then I would say US assembled scope, because for example, even like the Leupold Mark V, it's put together in the United States, but there are components inside from either Japan, Germany, or China. So the glass that Leupold, so no, I would say if you bought a Leupold Mark V 2 years ago or bought a Leupold Mark V now, odds are the glass might probably, and the glass and the components might come from different places, because they source for glass and components from wherever they can get it for the price point, and it's going to be one of three places. It's going to be US, China, or Japan, and that was straight from Leupold when we were shooting them. Yeah, so hopefully that answered that question. I mean, like, I really don't want to go too crazy on it. Drew, awesome. So Drew's a member. Thank you very much for supporting it. Hopefully. 150 comments? Jesus, people. I have 150 comments to go through. Yes, you absolutely can do that. Ryan, Tract is a great company. Now, so I mean, kind of like really kind of going back to it is the people who are doing videos on them are either customers or creators or match shooters who want to help the company out. You don't have a ton of big big creators who cover Tract, and that's because it just doesn't make sense financially to them. I would say Sean Utley, he does publish it, and it's because he actually truly does believe over. How many mils of holdovers does the reticle have? I believe it is. I believe it was like 20. Let me just double check, guys. 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32. Actually, I think it's like 40. So you can zoom all the way out. You're going to have the entire tree to it. Now that you can actually see it, but yeah. So let's say, for example, like if you're on, let's say 15 or 20 magnification, I would say comfortably, I would use up to 16 or so mils of holdover. Yeah, you can even go 20. Yeah, so I mean, it does have that, which is actually what I love. Hey, Aaron, thank you for joining us. Possibly send me an email or send me a text. I'll put you in touch with them. I think it would be a good partnership to explore. And worst case, I will make the personal introduction at Shot Show. So GPO is a company that I played with a little bit, but I don't have too much information on. And once again, you guys are all your questions and comments, like you're screwing up my plan of stuff. Wait, I think I'm making progress here. Yes. Absolutely. Smash that like button so it shows that there's engagement on the video and we'll have more people come in. And hey, you gotta give me credit. We've been doing this, so like I think it's like 4 or 5 Sundays in a row now. And let me know what you think about Sundays versus other days. That would also be take a picture of that. Send me an email. Actually, I'm going to take a picture of that right now. So that is going to be a good discussion with Ilya. That'll be a really, really, really good one. But here's the thing, though. So, for example, like here, it's super smooth. It's not stiff at all. I will say, so kind of going back to the Arc and EP5 and that 4-16, I like the EP5 for what it is. The iBox is really shitty on it, though. But the 4-16, so I've never played with it before. And I had it on that Scar that we were shooting that I did a YouTube short on. the parallax and the magnification adjustments were so stiff. Like, we had to hold it, like, so when we were sighting in for him, like, in order to move the magnification, it would turn the entire scope. It was just, it was, yeah. I don't think it was as good. The 5 to 25, I think, is a really good value for what it is. Area, okay, you got Athlon, yeah. But you said you don't want Chinese. Okay, James. So hopefully I answered the questions. Yeah, Athlon. I mean, I know the people at Athlon. They make really, really, really good stuff. They absolutely do. Ooh, great question. Okay, Savage Elite Precision. Let me know what you want to do with the Savage Elite Precision. So I did a couple of videos with it. I got an email that Savage wants the gun back, or if I want to buy it out and keep it or whatnot. I do like it, especially since right now that's my only functioning 300 PRC. So you guys know that I don't drink soda. This is unsweetened iced tea. P.S. I quit sugar about 6 months ago. So if you see me drinking like soda, like, just smack the crap out of me. So I had the Ruger Precision in 300 PRC, and I was testing some hot loads. I had some basically get stuck that we had to beat it out. So the bolt stop sheared off on the back when we were like malleting it out. So I got to fix that or somehow. Like, I can't get, like, there's one piece that's stuck in there, and then like YouTuber life, like a whole bunch of new stuff comes up. So I didn't have the time with it. So right now the Savage Elite Precision 300 PRC is the only gun that I have in 300 PRC. What also, I think it's a fantastic gun. We'll definitely do some more videos with it. I think when we go out to a mile, like, personally, I think right now it's a little pointless of shooting it at 700 yards. But if you want to see it at 700 yards, by all means, do let me know. I think one of the really cool video ideas with that is, so one of the things actually I surprised myself with is, so I got over the last year, a bunch of my suppressors got cleared from ATF jail, aka waiting for them. And I think shooting with a can is awesome. It's nice and quiet, but on 300 PRC in particular, it absolutely changed the recoil characteristics, and I don't like it. So the recoil on that 300 PRC without a break, it's sharp, but it's quick. When I put a suppressor on there, it definitely cut back the recoil, but because it's a long ass barrel to begin with, and then you add a suppressor, and it's like a good quiet can is also going to be a lot of back pressure. So it changed the recoil impulse from like just bang to bang. And it was like, I hated it because basically it's like, yeah, you got to have more follow through on the gun and all that stuff. I didn't really like the recoil impulse. I put on the strike without warning brake slash tuner, and oh my freaking God, that gun became a joy to shoot. Stupid loud. Great brake and tuner. It is available on Anarchy Outdoors. And if you're a channel member, there is a discount just for channel members. Hit the join button right there and then go to community tab. There are discounts, special discounts just for community members. And it's like anarchyoutdoors.com. So it changed the recoil characteristics of that gun completely. So we will do that. But I did actually want to do a video kind of like what the differences are going to be with the brake versus with a can, and kind of like what muzzle device people should consider. So we'll probably end up keeping that gun. Can't you guys just go out there and shoot in your backyard? Okay, so kind of basically the joke with that is when you lie to your wife about how much something cost, when you die or something happens and she's going to sell it for a reasonable price, that's what it is. The goal of it is make more money and make sure your wife also has a hobby. So she doesn't tell you what you do with your hobby and she can do her hobby, or better yet, just become a gun tuber, and it's all a business expense. For real. Actually, it's funny though. So, like, quick backstory to this. So, my brother was on this live stream a little bit earlier. He commented, and he always gives me crap. So, I hover around high 2, low 3 digit numbers in terms of firearms, and most of it really was because after the YouTube channel. And I remember, so almost like as an immigrant family, my brother is like, he bought his first gun and brought it home, and my parents freaked the hell out. So, being like good Soviets, good Slavs, it's like, how dare you have a gun? It's like civilized, like, you don't need a gun. The gun's just gonna go off and kill somebody, like that whole thing. And it's not that like we were liberal or anything, but like just firearms weren't part of the culture. So he always like kind of brings it up. So, I mean, like, he's always had, probably I would say maybe like 10 to 20 firearms, something like that. I mean, he had pretty much everything that you would actually need. And I do believe, if you ask me for a number, there are about 12 guns that you actually need, and everything beyond that is just want and nice to have. So anytime you have a conversation, or like I bring another gun in, or come back from the range, or he comes to visit, and I'm like, yeah, it's like I have like X amount in the garage or in the car, or like I'm moving back and forth. Like, he always like gives my mom or like somebody a hard time. It's like, so like, why don't you give him crap for having like so many guns? And you were like on my case when I brought his. And like my mom, like, the reply was like, but he makes money with it. So it was just, it's kind of like, honestly, it's like, if you want to have a bunch of firearms, do something with it. Become a content creator. We have a great group, and I encourage anybody who is interested in firearms. If you want to be a gun tuber, absolutely reach out. We'll definitely help you. We have a great network of people, great community, and especially if your passion is like long range shooting, things like that. You should definitely do that. But do note though, that once you kind of start taking it seriously, and anybody who's in the firearms business, it's like, ask them, hey, when's the last time you shot? So it's like sometimes it's so, number one, it's like, if I can't just go to the range and not have a camera or something, like, I'd feel really bad that I'm going to the range and I'm not recording. And it definitely kills a lot of enjoyment out of it. Um, I can honestly say, like, I don't get a ton of enjoyment out of just going to shoot, unless it's like really pushing the envelope, i.e., 300 yards with a 22, or like getting as cheap of a gun as possible and seeing how far we can take it. Like that, it's like we've almost like been desensitized that much to the enjoyment aspect, because we have access to, I mean, like, collectively as gun tubers, between going to the events, I mean, we almost have access to a lot of really nice stuff, that, and it basically does become work, that in order to have fun, it needs to be something completely ridiculous. Or let's say, for example, like when I did the video on a Ruger Super Wrangler and 22 WMR, because it's so unaccustomed to what I generally shoot, like, that was just stupid fun. Um, so there are challenges. There's also downsides to being in the content creation space. I mean, it absolutely is. Um, and then for real, like, if there's a topic, but I do realize I'm here to create content for you guys. So if there's something simple, or you might think you'd want, just holler and do. And it's a good, gentle reminder that not everybody's a gun tuber. I mean, let's put this way. I mean, here's the story. So, like, and besides being the gun tuber, it's like, what most people don't know, and it was also a question that people asked, is like, hey, how do, like, you have a brand new channel, how the hell did you go to a private Ruger media event, or like, how do you get these new guns from companies? Like, generally you have to be an established content creator in order to get that. I ran an investment advisory practice for 15 years, and a lot of my clients were gun owners, so I started naturally researching and then publishing on the publicly traded stocks. So if you're an investor in Ruger, Smith and Wesson, Cabela's, Vista Outdoors, and you read research articles on Seeking Alpha, Wall Street Journal, Google Finance, Yahoo Finance, you've probably read some of the stuff that I wrote. So that is how, like, when I was getting burned out from finance, that was the transition point to getting into the gun space as a content creator. And it was actually the CFO of Ruger and another friend of mine that I helped consult. He was a former CEO of a smaller gun company. They were like, "Hey, have you considered doing like a YouTube channel?" I'm like, "That's a good idea." And then honestly, quite honestly, like I was talking to a friend of mine who told me how much he gets paid as a retainer by an established accessories brand. So he was a writer for one of the big, popular, hard-hitting, recoiling magazines, and he told me how much one of the companies pays him as a retainer to quote unquote keep us in mind. I was like, that's nuts. I mean, that's insane. So that one retainer was far more than what I ever got paid cumulatively for publishing research articles on these very same companies. So it was kind of like it is motivation. It was definitely, it's a good industry. It's tough, but it's, yeah. So basically the moral with that is like, so that's how I got into the YouTube. That's how, so when I was able to, when I asked a company, I guess I can say it now since the key isn't there anymore. So when I decided to be a gun tuber, there was a Smith & Wesson that I wanted to cover. So most gun tubers, they generally have to go to a big show and try to get somebody from a marketing company or something like that. I emailed the CEO and the head of public relations for Smith & Wesson. I'm like, "Hey, I enjoyed meeting you guys. I enjoyed seeing you guys at the analyst meeting. By the way, can I get these two guns for review? I'm starting a YouTube channel." Next thing I know is I get a CC I'm CC'd on an email from the CEO to somebody in marketing, basically saying, "Hey, get him whatever the hell he needs." So I did have that opportunity that a lot of people don't. But the peculiar part is, while I had pull with a lot of the larger companies, it did not do anything with smaller companies who are like, "Who the hell are you?" when you're asking him for like $100 trigger or something like that. We're like, "Well, we don't plan on going public or anything else like that." So it is interesting. Um, Gen 3 for $2,600 is a good price. I would also say basically if you're spending that much money on used, I would want to see it in person. The Aries ETR does track well. Athlon products do track really, really well. Yes, you do. Okay, great question. So this is actually a really, really, really good question. So on a stock Ruger precision rifle, I think as the bolt wears in, it definitely, a lot of the machining marks go away. The other thing that definitely helps, and I love it on my custom shop RPR. So from Anarchy Outdoors, you have the replacement bolt shroud. So I have bought the titanium one, which is actually a little bit heavier than I believe than the aluminum, and it comes with a tool. So what it actually does, because the bolt shroud is so big and versus the cheaper plastic or aluminum one, it changes the balance point of the bolt, so it drags less. So it's super duper smooth. So the bolt shroud by Anarchy Outdoors will absolutely help with that. Idols. Please don't idolize YouTubers. Um, a lot of us are as nice in person as the persona that we put out. There are a few, I will say, that are complete douchebags. Like they'll put out themselves, like they'll make themselves like these really, really cool people, but then you meet them in person, and we're like, who are you? It's like, or like, you're bothering me. I mean, there are some people who are like, they're paid to go be at a place. And then afterwards, it's like, if they're not paid, it's like, you're like a nuisance to them. And don't get me wrong, it's like, I understand if you have millions of fans and stuff that you're probably tired of people coming up and talking to you. But here's the thing: if you don't want attention, you don't put yourself out there. If you don't want criticism, you don't put yourself out there. If you are making money from being quote unquote a celebrity or anything else like that, it just basically comes as part of it. And don't be a douchebag. And like I would say, like a lot of the bigger content creators were like super duper nice in person, and then there are some who are like, well, you're truly beneath me. It's like, what are you doing? And I would also say, like, a lot of people who make it big and then are these general celebrities within people, but you actually knew these people before they became celebrities and were like, wow, this pedo creep is now like this big sensation. And then when that stuff comes out, you're like, well, I wasn't surprised. It was like the worst kept secret. 600 yards with a 22 would be really, really good. You need to have good quality ammo at that. I would love to have Josh come out, but I think like I'm not sure if he shoots that far with 22. He mostly does a lot of matches and precision type stuff. I believe actually, Aaron, was that you though saying that you were trying to take a 22 out to 1,000 yards? But yeah, so the first time I shot 22 past 300 yards was actually at a Comp Expo event out in Colorado. So it was a Ruger Precision Rimfire. There's Voodoo guns there. And the fact that like I hit him, like, wow, what distance is this? And he's like, yeah, 670 yards. I'm like, bullshit. Like I range find it, 670. And like you see the steel swing. It was awesome. Oh my God, these comments just keep on coming. So when I started answering these, there was 100 in the backlog. There's 180 comments right now. I am going to check for super chats in a few. I will absolutely address them. And as long as you're here, we have some time. I got a bunch more spare batteries. Wait, I just saw that one. Wait, that's so weird. The comments just repeated. Okay, we got that. I'm trying to talk to them in order to create more. Okay. Aaron, did you you didn't go to the Comp Expo event? Actually, Aaron, are you a dealer for Vortex? Do you have the Gen 3 or no? Because if you want the Gen 3, we might be able to get you hooked up as a channel member. James, hit that join button. Okay, this is so weird. The comments are... Okay, we got that. Okay. Do you like the Loophole Mark 5 and 5 to 35? I have the 5 to 25, not the... Wait, do you have a 5 to 35 now? I saw they had the 7 to 35. The 7 to 35, I believe, cuts down on the internal adjustment. I think the 5 to 25 is a great all-around scope. But I haven't actually played too in-depth with the brand new ones. Okay, so this is a great comment. Long range for me is 500 yards rimfire and 2200 for center fire. Absolutely. I think those are actually really, really good numbers. I would say 10 years ago, I would say it's kind of like weird. So I think with modern cartridges and modern manufacturing, saying you hit 1,000 yards, it's almost kind of like, okay, it was like 600 back ago. And same thing for rimfire. I don't think it was like And Aaron, we'll have to do a stream on this because I mean you're much more attuned to rimfire markets. Did it all start with the RPR rimfire and also PRS and NRL 22 that we started seeing this? I mean, like I remember we had like some higher end Gucci 1022s, but I mean, like shooting regularly past 300 yards with a rimfire was almost like absurd. Right? I got a screenshot of this comment. James, you're awesome. I appreciate it. Buzz, thank you for joining. There's a bunch of new cans. No, not the Savage. It was the Ruger Precision Rifle in 300 PRC. And it couldn't take a beating with a mallet in order to get the bolt out. And especially since it was the type of range where I needed to get it out there. Although I still think it's probably going to be a little bit stronger than the bolts on the Savage. But I should probably start a section for members where we kind of have like an exchange or post it on our Discord server. That is the ultimate truth. Good night, James. I've seen 3 tangent theta scopes go down in a single match. Okay, and what other scopes went down as well? That would be interesting. Ooh, great one. Okay. Hey, Slav, how's the Savage Switchback project going? I found the bolt extremely sticky and the plastic in the stock sits higher than the brass or copper pillars. The plastic in the stock. I can't quite imagine that last part that you're talking about, but I imagine we will very, very shortly. So I just got done wrapping up again, redoing that video with it. I've been shooting it for quite a bit. So far, it's been shooting quite well. There were some, I would say, QC issues. So like when they had to modify the bolt, there were some part, I mean, like there was like machining marks, there were gouge marks, that like really bugged me and irritated me. But the gun just basically just wants to shoot. And actually the biggest issue is like I'm playing around with it, I'm bringing it home, and all of a sudden the scope flops side to side. So the scope base came completely loose, and this was the factory scope base. So the full video with the longer range shooting and the summary, the full detailed quote unquote review on that gun is going to be out probably not this week, but the week after. And then I have all the parts, everything that we're going to throw it into a chassis in a different type of stock. And we're really going to try to see. I think the magazines on there are like a massive pain in the butt. So basically, they modified an existing magazine by putting a spacer in the back, but it's difficult to load and it's only 3 or 4 rounds. I think they could have done a better job with it. But I do think it's a really, really good value for what it is. It's still the only, and I was actually surprised about this. It's still the only reasonably priced 6mm arc that is actually accessible. So you have on the lower end, you have the Savage Access, but I think so the Access is all the same size action. So for long and short, so getting that big action just for 6 arc, I think is completely ridiculous. And we don't have readily available Howas. Like, I mean, there are unicorns out there every so often. And on Brownells, the barreled action options they had, the one that was in stock was the standard contoured barrel. I wanted the heavier one. So you don't really have that much. And then beyond that, the only ones you really still have are going to be like your Christiansens, I think one or two others, but those are like $2,500 guns. So I'm still actually fairly disappointed that we don't have other factory bolt options available. CZ has the mini action, and well, they could have made a killing with this, but instead they chose to stick to 224 Valkyrie. Yeah. I'm not going back in the topic. But I haven't had any sticky bolt issues with it. I had the occasional extraction issues. I would say ejection, not rather than extraction. I would say ejection issues, but that's your typical Savage ejection issues. But I haven't had sticky bolt. And I've done some load development with some fairly hot stuff, and I haven't had issues. What I would probably say is if you have sticky bolt, I would venture to ask what kind of ammo it is, because the chambers in them are a little bit different from others. So if you're reusing brass that were in other guns, you will have some issues. Also keep in mind that some of the dies for 6 arc, is there a small base die for 6 arc yet? Some of them, it's almost like 6.5 PRC issues. Yeah. So I haven't had any issues with factory ammo. I did have a little bit more stickier issues, but those were the cutter loads. But nothing that would really get me crazy. I hand polished my Ruger American Predator bolt. It's so smooth for a Ruger. Yep. I mean, I have a couple friends with like Ruger American bolts that like they really polished. It was a jeweler's cloth, and it's been awesome. And also the other, so Aaron can talk more in depth about it, but Ruger did redesign the cocking piece and apparently the firing pins. So these newer guns, they are a little bit more smoother as well. Quite a few people do use lapping compound, answering a question. Great one. Speaking of Smith & Wesson, what do you think of the M&P folding pistol carbine? I think now that the patents on 5.7 have expired, everybody and their mother is going to come out with a 5.7 because they feel like they need to. You still have one big issue: the ammo is stupid expensive. And honestly, the recoil on it, it's like, depending on the design, it's like you might as well be shooting 9mm or just already a center fire. What rangefinder do I recommend? Once again, it depends on the distance. The one I've been playing with is the Vortex the furry binoculars with the rangefinder in there. Has an amazing one for sale. Which one? Arrow Precision Soulless Action. Action coming out anytime soon. Is it still just the guns, or I could have sworn they're already selling the action? I did play with them at SHOT Show. I wasn't blown away by it. But they do have a good affiliate program, so that's why some people are pumping it up. The mold is higher than the pillars, making from metal to plastic. Now, okay. I don't remember. So honestly, the last time I had the gun completely apart was like months ago. Yeah, they'll probably do it. But then again, so I mean, really the intention of it was I was going to be tossing the stock anyway. I was literally, so the reason why I think the switchback is such a great value is two reasons. Number one is it's a great barreled action. And it's the only one, if you wanted to get more than an 18-inch barrel, because the tactical, and for some reason, Savage makes the 110 tactical in 18-inch, And you couldn't get, if you wanted to get longer than 20 inches, you needed to get the switchback. So that's the primary reason I got it, and knowing full well that the stock, it looks cool, but it's going to be a pointless stock, and the stock is going to be tossed into a chassis. And I think the money that you're saving between the switchback and the tactical, that's going to get you about $200 that you can apply towards the chassis. I would probably say this, Aaron, does KRG make a Savage 110 stock? I have a Sharps Heatseeker chassis for it, and I did fit it in there, and it felt oh so good. And we have some really cool accessories from Anarchy Outdoors for that gun as well. So as soon as I come back from my trip, so this weekend, I will be playing with it. All right, so, and sorry, the lights are, we've been on for 2 hours, and that's why that light is already going down. So now it's a little bit more intimate. I will get for all these questions, I promise. And that's why Ruger should make a 6-arc bolt gun. Should, but I'm not sure if they will. Let's put it this way. They haven't made a... Oh, fuck, did I say a little too much? All right. So when a major company is making decisions about what we're planning on producing, one of the points of consideration is how much risk they're going to have by doing it. So when 6-arc came out, they were primarily targeting semi-autos, and Ruger made 6-arc prototypes for Hornady when they were testing the cartridge. I suspect, my personal belief, if we see Ruger make a 6-arc, if we see Ruger make a 6-arc, it's going to be the AR platform. I'm not sure it makes monetary sense for them to do a 6-arc Ruger American. They can, I mean, really just be a new barrel because it uses the 6.5 Grendel bolt, but like, do they need to? I do think they would dominate a lot of it, but really that type of cartridge would be best served by a mini action. I honestly, like, if CZ made the 6-arc in the mini action, so instead of 7.62 by 39 or like 224 Valkyrie, do 6-arc or 6.5 Grendel, they would kill it. I mean, they would absolutely kill it. But I mean, considering that they don't even do 6.5 Grendel, I don't expect them to do 6-arc. Ruger, I don't know. I think if people just keep hammering it, they might do a token run of them. But I haven't seen anything. I haven't heard anything. But it would be cool. But it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a Ruger American in 6-arc. I already have a barrel. So one of the 6.5 Grendels is going to get converted to 6-arc. That might really be the way to go. And that way you can get like a fairly high, nice gun. Okay. Yeah. So I could have, like, RCBS does have it. It would definitely help, especially. So, I mean, I will say that pretty much the 6-arc ammo that I've tried, and I've shot the same 6-arc brass for like 3 or 4 different guns. The chambers dimensions were all over the map. They're all over the map. And even like with the regular dies, when I resize them, it was fairly difficult. So a small base die would help until you basically keep that specific set of brass for a specific gun. And I would certainly do that, especially because keep in mind, there are separate SAMI specs that they published and separate data that they published for 6-arc bolt gun than they did semi-auto. So, I mean, honestly, that's one of the big issues with 6-arc is that there's 2 different standards for bolt guns and semi-autos. So a regular 6-arc low data that they use at lower pressures for semi-autos is a little bit more, it's a little anemic for bolt guns. That's really what it comes down to. And there's no separate 6-arc bolt gun loads that are available from the factory. I would say that's the Achilles heel to 6 arc, but I will say more and more people are searching for 6 arc as well. Apparently, Salve is a nice guy in person. Good night, Troy. Aw, thank you, Derek. Aaron from Anarchy is too. Anarchy, Aaron is a really good dude. He has a little bit of wicked sense of humor, and like you don't know whether he's being facetious or trying to be funny. But he's a really good dude, and he's a massive supporter of the gun community, and just actually a really cool dude. And I'm trying to set up a god off with Aaron. Your stream runs so long, you better see a urologist. I have not seen one in a little while. No, actually, I'm good. It's your damn questions. No, actually, I absolutely appreciate it. Oh yeah, the barrel of my Savage Switchback heats. How fast are you firing it? Not sure. Do you have a channel? Do you have it on yours? I will absolutely be looking at that. I honestly, I mean, it really could be just an issue that I got a really, really good shooting sample. I have not. I would probably say take a look at the scope base. Because as the gun heats up, the scope base and the screws, I mean, the screws were a little tiny in there. Check the scope base. But I mean, it's not like, for example, like I had massive issues with Mossbergs. After 3 rounds, the groups are just completely all over the freaking place. Okay, are you planning on carrying? Are you still carrying Vortex? Or no, you did. You carried Athlon, but I thought you had some Vortex as well on the site. How come there is no popular 7mm cartridge for the AR-15? So for the AR-15 or the AR platform in general? So AR-15, the issue that you're going to run into if you go 7mm is that it's generally going to be almost like 350 legend-ish. You're going to have that. But 7mm, really, the reason why there's not a ton of 7mm out there is you have less bullet selection. So, I mean, 7mm for the most part, I would say is only second less popular than 25 cal. I mean, and it's only like 6mm was like also like various 6mm were also fairly dead, with the exception of 243 Winchester, until we started getting a lot more bullet selection, and then all the hotness came out. Outside of the match circles, which were shooting 6 GT, I'm sorry, 6 Dasher, 6 PPC for a while. I like that Slav passes on helpful information rather than some YouTubers that send content from a high horse. I think I get that. Explain a little bit more on that, or an example. Send me one of your Grendels so Z can make a 6 arc Ruger out of that thing. I mean, I will say, so an interesting part. So I had my Ruger 6.5 Grendel with Anarchy Outdoors accessories on it in that chassis at the range. And there was one of the employees that worked for one of the local gun builders, and he came up to play with that gun, and he was like, wow, this is a Ruger. It's like he didn't like believe it. It became like that much nice of a gun. Okay, long range 22 probably after NRL 22 became popular and the NRL X matches popped up. Now, the X matches, I believe, are long range 22 because NRL 22, a lot of it is inside 100 yards anyway. Just you're shooting at smaller targets at those distances, correct? And oh my God, I actually caught up with the comments. Yay. Yeah. Wow, we've been on for 2 hours already. Time flies. Um, okay. Wow, I caught up for the comments. All right, so that's that. The other one, so let me know what your interest is. So I do have a couple of things I need to do with 8.6 Blackout, but shooting that FN Scar 6.5 Creedmoor semi-auto, I'm like, I want a semi-auto 6.5 Creedmoor or semi-auto like long-range gun. It was cool. I mean, like basically, like it after shooting bolt guns for such a long time, I was like, wow, this actually like kills a lot of the recoil. Granted, there's a bunch more moving mass in place, but it was actually really, really interesting. Um, so that's definitely. I suppose I could add an Anarchy Outdoor scope base to the Ruger 308. Is the Ruger American or Ruger Precision? So I would say the best accessories you can do for the Ruger American, like if you want to really push the 308, the Anarchy Outdoor scope base, because you can get it in 30 and 40 MOA, is going to be super awesome. I would say one of the big things for the Ruger Precisions and the Ruger Americans that makes a big difference is going to be the bolt shroud. It definitely okay. Ruger American Predator. Okay, so for the Ruger American Predator, go on Anarchy Outdoors, get yourself a Timney trigger. Big, 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 big plus. You can also get the, I would say, getting rid of the plastic bolt shroud on the back and getting the aluminum one is going to make a big difference. And then get the bolt handle and bolt knob, because that is going to make a massive difference in just how the gun feels. It changes the geometry just a little bit. And then upgrade the scope base. Basically, I mean, the scope base, it's unless you get the one with the level, the only thing that's going to do for you versus the stock one is if you need 30 or 40 MOA. But the bolt shroud, the bolt handle, and bolt knob will make a meaningful difference versus the stock one. Now, Aaron, you still have the Ruger American. This KRG makes the Bravo chassis for that. I think like dropping it into that would be awesome, or the Sharps Heat Seeker chassis. And you're going to have a gun that's going to shoot lights out. I mean, it's going to feel great, all of that stuff. That's what I would do. That's what we did. And like I said, and literally the scope base would be the last thing I upgrade on that. Because functionally, it's not going to, unless you actually need it. Try the Timney trigger. I still don't like the trigger blade in there. Okay, so he has a KRG Bravo, good. Bolt handle, check. And bolt knob, I'm assuming, along with that firing pin spring, check. Then yeah, if you really want to push it, getting a 30 or 40 MOA scope base to go along with a good scope is definitely going to be good. Any thoughts on the Sako TRG 22A1? I haven't shot one, but I've played with one. I would say get a Sako if you want a Sako. Yeah, I honestly, I don't recall that much more about it. I will say that kind of in that same ballpark, I've recently played with a Steyr, and that was pretty fun. But honestly, I like the Springfield 2020, kind of like in terms of feel, but realistic. If you want something stupid cool that feels really, really solid, and I'm literally, as soon as I get confirmation that CZ is getting my gun back, I'm buying it again in 6.5 Creedmoor. The CZ600 Alpha Action, so it's a new controlled round feed action. It's like a hybrid controlled round feed action. It feels smoother than any Tikas I've played with, any Springfields. it feels really nice. And honestly, for the price point, I think it's going to be a really, really good rifle in 6.5 Creed. Um, and honestly, I'm going to try my best at this year's SHOT Show to get someone to do a chassis. Now, here's a kicker. So CZ is owned by Colt. Well, CZ owns Colt. Colt at SHOT Show did a Colt CBX. So it's a Colt precision rifle. I don't know, whatever the hell the CBX stands for. And it was basically a CZ600 action clone that they had in the chassis made by MDT. So I suspect, and as far as I know, it should be a similar type action. I suspect they can make a chassis for the 600, or if we can get somebody to try to make an action for the 600, I think that would be cool. I mean, I honestly like, so on if somebody asked me, so with the price points the way that they are, if somebody wants a rifle that they can take hunting or for precision rifle shooting or getting into it, and they're not going to make a bunch of upgrades, so meaning you can take the aftermarket out of the equation, I think by far bang for the buck is going to be that CZ600. I mean, the gun shot sub half MOA consistently out of the box with a stock that was rubbing up against the barrel. The gun just freaking shot. And that was at 800 bucks. And my biggest issue with that gun, it really wasn't the gun, it was CZ. I think CZ is incompetent, and you can take that straight to them. I think their management is incompetent. I don't know if it's whether it's CZ Europe or CZ USA, but it's truly like they had the right idea. They knew exactly what would sell, and then they just said, "Yeah, fuck it, let's screw it up a little bit." So that's based on caliber choices. But even despite the caliber choice issues, the big selling point for that was they overpromised user swappable barrels. And it's only because they promised that as the main feature and then just basically said, screw it, that I have an issue with it. Kind of like if you're going conspiracy theorist, and you can go back to my videos that I did earlier on it, or if Nick or somebody's watching it, put it in the comments. I suspected, so what they promised, the user swappable barrels, commercially, I don't think it was going to be successful. But there are companies, and I know one of their goals was to increase their market share. So even if they had to lose money on it, it would have been worth it to grow market share. And I was hoping that's what they were doing. And I was like, look, I don't think we're going to, because I honestly didn't think we were going to see them. So I almost suspect that they came up with that feature, then realized, yeah, maybe we're going to end up losing money on it, or somebody found out and like, okay, well, how can we renege on this? And by basically, quote unquote, well, we found up a gun that possibly blew up or whatnot. So we want to recall it. And by doing that, now they no longer have to be able to sell barrels that you yourself can install and do. And the problem is because the lugs on that barrel, the reciprocal lugs to the lugs on the action are actually embedded into the barrel. Your regular gunsmiths aren't able to spin up those type of barrels. You need different type of CNC machinery or whatever else in order to make. You can't just do it on a regular lathe. So you're not going to be able to get aftermarket barrels for them. It's a very similar system to how Desert Tech does their barrels. However, the way that kind of like Desert Tech does it, or like the way that they get around it, is you have an actual barrel and then you get a receiver extension, and then we put those in, and that's how the companies that did aftermarket barrels have done them. But at the price, I mean, we're talking Desert Tech versus a $600 CZ600 Alpha. So totally different price points. It was commercially, I think it was very, very difficult to do. But the fact that they promised on it and they didn't deliver on it kind of took away a lot of it. And my view on that gun was jaded. However, the gun itself, if you didn't know any of the marketing bullshit and you purely looked at the gun, it's a damn good gun. And the fact that now you can pick one up at under $500, it's a game changer. Because I mean, let's, for example, like you can get a you can get a Ruger American Predator, which is an amazing value that you can then upgrade. So the Ruger American, let's put it this way, the Ruger American is an accurate gun. It's consistently sub MOA. It's not going to be consistently sub MOA, not even close, but it's consistently sub MOA. It doesn't feel the nicest, but it's reliable and generally it works, and there's a growing aftermarket for it. And it's at that price point. The Savage 110 is a good gun. I would say limited in slightly different ways aftermarket, but it's been in long action. It is a fairly consistent action, but did I eat a fly or something? But it is QC is inconsistent. Give me 1 second, guys. Oh. So the QC was inconsistent on there. And while Remington 700 is no longer around and the new stuff that just came out is complete garbage. But if you throw in the CZ600 into the picture, it's nicer than any Bergaras. It's an amazing shooting gun from a company that vast majority of people have never heard of. So I would, if you're looking for a gun or if you just wanted to play with something cool, yeah, it's a nice gun and I'm looking forward to it. All right. And on that note, we just hit midnight. We're at 2 hours and 16 minutes. I think I answered all the questions and I absolutely appreciate this. I absolutely appreciate it. And honestly, it kind of goes back to, it's like, I'm one of those people, like, I'll give the information first. And I know as long as I do good, it'll come back to me. And it's like, and I know there are people who are in it for the quick buck or whatnot. And it pisses me off. And especially because, look, it's like, if you truly deeply care about the two-way community and gun rights that are almost being eradicated worldwide, then we should do everything we can in order to foster the gun culture that we have. And by selling people crap that they don't need is not the way to do it. Yes, it enriches some of the manufacturers, but it does not help the gun community, and it's a short-term fix to a long-term problem. So, on that note, thank you everybody who has joined in. Make sure you are part of our Discord community, and I will put that message in here as well. If you're not part of our Discord community, you go ahead and join it. It's right in the comments over there. www.slav.ly/Discord. And we'll go from there. So I will try to have the video out for Tuesday for you guys. I'm going away actually to Texas from Tuesday to Thursday for a quick YouTube conference, and then we shall be back, and we'll still have really, really good weather, so we'll be able to record a whole bunch more content, and I will see you guys next Sunday for episode 67. So thanks for watching, keep on squatting, and I'll see you in the next video.